Hello! Hi, everyone. Sorry, that was really loud. Hey, how do we do? It's the stream. I know this is kind of an awkward day to do it, but, things happen when they happen. So, long story short, I had to do a quick switcheroo of the streams this week because of two things. One, my day off was switched this week from Monday to Friday. So that happened very quickly. And then on top of that, there's a new Step Back video coming out today. So this is not a countdown for a quick step. This is a countdown for a Step Back Prime. Ah, man, it's going to be a whole thing. So yeah, I was up late last night getting this thing finished. It's up for patrons now, so if you're a patron and you'd rather, or want to become a patron, and you want to watch that rather than this, I mean, what can you do? Anyways, you can go. So let's see, who's in the chat today? We've got Luke Lee, who chose me over Tom Hartman. Good job. Got 255, got Stucked Steven, and Yabantz Hermes, Michael McGee, and Maximilian Gale. Nice. Everyone's here. We've got a real party going on. Anyways, what's the first question I got? In a post-gender world, will there be people with female or male secondary sex characteristics, or would the idea be to use transhumanism to make all humans intersex? I mean, the thing about sex characteristics is just like I'm trying to I don't have a fully fledged perfect utopia in my head, but if we were to find a way to move past gender into a post-gender type of world, there's still be people with female or male sexual characteristics. I mean, probably people those are kind of innate in your birth, if I remember correctly. I'm not for us all being in silver jumpsuits and being all neutered. It's just that people would just express and have the expression that they would want, and we wouldn't have clearly delineated categories about who belongs to what or where. So that's my. And then, of course, yeah, we could all be AIs, in which case we don't have to worry about it anymore, which is nice. Go Raptors. Oh, my God. Okay, yeah, this is a thing I should definitely talk about this today, which is that as a person who lives in Toronto, all right, I don't know, okay, this is the closest I'll ever get to sports talk. As a person who lives in Toronto, we have a NBA team, a basketball team called the Toronto Raptors, where their logo is a velociraptor. The thing about the Toronto Raptors is that they are the only Canadian NBA team, and they've been around since the mid-90s, and now they are in the final game of the NBA big final game. So hype is extremely high because this is the first time it's ever happened. And on top of that, it's the first time a Canadian team has ever been in the finals. So there's so much Raptor hype that I know when a game is happening because I hear people shouting in the streets. And when they win, you hear horns honking and people shouting, and it's just it's a huge deal. And yeah, it's a best of 7 game, but they you can see when you could definitely hear, because I think they played a game last night and they won. So and also you'll just be going to the store and grabbing something and be like, hey, did you catch the game last night? And I'm like, no, I didn't. So yeah, Raptors fever has hit Toronto to an extent that I am completely unprepared for. the sports team mascot is a dinosaur, which I think because the Raptors were made back when like we were at the peak hype of Jurassic Park, like in like 1995, and yeah. So now we have to live with our dinosaur sports mascot forever. What's your favorite King of the Hill episode? That's a good question. King of the Hill is a weird show because sometimes it's good and then sometimes it's really not good because sometimes it's just run by I like them better the less that Mike Judge is is touching it, the better. I'm trying to think though, like it's the closest thing to like a conservative comedy that like comes to mind immediately. But even then, it's still funny. Yeah, That's My Purse, I Don't Know You is a pretty good one. The one where Luann becomes a communist is amusing, but then again, it's like final messages that communism is dumb and irrational and for children, which I do not like, but, you know. The more I think about King of the Hill, the less I like it, so let's just stop it there. Okay. Okay, so let's what's wrong with silver jumpsuits? Nothing. I just think that I like individuality. You think controlled economies are more efficient? I agree, at least if computers are involved, but do you think that you could ever have a controlled economy where people aren't forced to take part? Yes. I think that you could have a very strongly planned economy that isn't like forcing people to do certain things. That is most definitely true. If anything, it would be for making... Oh no, it's dropping frames. Come on. Why? Ugh. 1 second. Whoa, what was that sound? Were we good? Alright, sorry about that. This thing is the worst. Okay, so controlled economies are more efficient. I do think that a lot of the controls are about making an economy that is reactive to the desires of the people who live within it. And about making sure that the signals that make the machine run are the signals that we want to, besides just the one of maximizing profit. That's like the planned economy aspect. I'm not exactly sure where that involves coerced labor. I don't exactly know where the assumption that we have to have coerced labor comes from. That's just me. Because I mean, like, most of the time, a lot of the labor is, if we were to get ourselves into if we were to have a planned economy and we had an economy that was based on maximizing the amount of things that we that are actually good for society and good for things, then we would just have find higher incentive than under capitalism to either automate away the jobs that we don't want to have, or we would find a way to fairly distribute the jobs that literally nobody wants to do. You know? Like, if there is literally a job that nobody wants to do, then the only fair way to deal with that would be to split it evenly. But, like, I definitely would be against, like, coercive, like, the state forces you to become a factory line worker and you have no choice, there's no leaving, you are stuck in this forever. That would be grotesque. And yeah, I don't think a sufficiently especially because if you're in that kind of situation, you're not going to be a very good worker anyway. So in my mind, it would be incentivized to move somebody away, because the incentives are to maximize people's happiness and good for the environment and make people's welfare better. So, push on that. Who's a more left-wing, a right-wing member of the UK Labour Party or a super progressive member of the US Democrats? I have, like, the most right-wing member of the Labour Party that I can, like, I don't know of the British scales that much. The most right-wing member of the Labour Party that I can think of is Tony Blair. In which case, I'd probably put a progressive Democrat today more left-wing than a right-wing Labour Party person, but not by a ton. But I would think that a very progressive Democrat and like Tony Blair would not be that different, because even the most progressive Democrats that we have are like, God, they're very, what should I say? They're still never great on foreign policy. Americans, even Americans I am married to, for example, still can't seem to 100% crack the, like, you know, the anti-imperialism part. At least, you know, they can't fully get out of their system in a way. Not to say that Kelly's like pro, like, hawkish foreign intervention, but it just doesn't ring as like a priority. Like when I say that, like, hey, I don't, you know, super respect that Elizabeth Warren voted for an increase in Trump's military spending increase, and like that kind of stuff will take second fiddle to like other things. Okay. Does the milkshake debate just serve to create a largely pointless strife among leftists? A couple of podcasts I followed made that argument the other day. Yeah, I mean, I haven't thought about it too much, because this week has been kind of insane, and like, you know, everyone's having the milkshake talk. But in my mind, I mean, there's a lot of socialists these days who people on the left who come from a liberal tradition, and the right and the centrists really are really good at pushing on people's liberal values in order to shame them into basically like attacking their own. And this happens a lot. This is like, I had a lot of friends who got really mad at me for backing Sanders as hard as I did in 2016, and this is pretty much why. There's a pretty good PR move on that, but I mean, yeah, milkshakes are like whatever to me. I think that the attempt to reframe it as political violence is ridiculous. I think most people would agree to that. Just especially because, like, you know, when the left attacks the right, it's by throwing milkshakes in their face, and then when the right attacks the left, they're running over women on the street. So like, it's a huge like, you know, double consciousness. But this is what we have to fight with. We're fighting against entrenched interests that don't particularly care about fairness or reality or about winning the argument. They care about empty rhetoric and, you know, tilting the game and tilting power so that they maintain their positions of privilege. Yo, listen up. Here's the story. All right. Should we use ice cream floats instead of milkshakes? That might work. In 2016, a podcaster and philosophy professor I like set up a discussion on a Facebook group called Monster Island where you can't get banned no matter what you say. Do you think that's a good idea? I don't know. Has it turned into a shit show? That's... When you're talking about online communities, like, the rules you set down say a lot about the kind of people who are going to go there. If you have a place where you can't get banned no matter what you say, then you're going to end up with it being a refuse of all of the people who can't say the things they want to say on other platforms. Like, if you are a white... Like, you're going to end up with reactionary right-wing people who have gotten kicked off other platforms. That's like what you... Because, like, it's like when... does anyone remember, like, maybe about a year or two ago, when there was this attempt to build a alternative platform to YouTube? I can't remember what it was called anymore, because it's probably dead by now. I think Dan Olson, the person who runs Folding Ideas, did a video about it. Either way, this YouTube alternative was very quickly touted as like the open free speech platform, and what happened was it just became filled with all the people who have gotten their accounts banned on YouTube. And so it just ended up with, like, white supremacists and drama videos and stuff like that. Yeah, VidMe. That's the name of it. VidMe. So, like, you have to realize that just because you want free speech doesn't mean you shouldn't have rules of conduct in discussion spaces. There's a difference between no rulers and no rules, you know? And... you have to know, I think that there's a ContraPoints video that's actually a pretty good description of this, that when you have, free speech, there's no such thing as completely, there's no such thing as completely neutral free speech. By opening up free speech to certain people and allowing certain ideas to flourish, you are, by their very nature, shutting out other speeches. If you allow complete and open-ended free speech and you end up in a community if you end up with a community that's full of, like, neo-Nazis and white supremacists, you are going to, through harassment and intimidation and just shutting down of ideas, you're going to push anybody who doesn't agree or feels threatened by those ideas out of the discussion. So that's why, like, I moderate my comments and I delete comments, because in the name of free speech, I am making sure that voices that typically do get suppressed by society, people of color, people of different gender identities and sexual orientations, and people of different faiths can feel free to express themselves without feeling the fear of being harassed, antagonized, and tossed out. And really, if you have 100% open free speech in some places, you're going to end up basically supporting those who have the most powerful, entrenched authority, i.e., we live in a white supremacist culture. We live in a very right-wing authoritarian culture. So that is what will thrive, because there will be more of them, and they will silence anybody else, and that's just what happens. There's really, like, the idea of quote-unquote free speech is actually a bit of a canard, and you can't really support it, or you can't really, like, it's not possible, you know. Because is like, you know, 8chan with, like, no rules, just don't post anything that's illegal, is that free speech when, like, there's no Discord at all, or discourse at all? A lot, like, if you go on there and disagree with the hive mind, you're going to get harassed out of existence. Like, there's not really much of there's really no point. Okay, there's just platforms and the people who get voices on them. Okay. Yeah, let's... Alright, we got a few more questions. Sorry, I don't have Kelly with me today, so I have to write them down myself. The UK doesn't even put ice creams in their milkshake. What's up with that? What do they put in their milkshakes? After 2012, some Republic reps tried to stop being the stupid racist party. In 2016, the party doubled down on stupid racist and won. Democrats say, hey, need to stop being corruption identity party. Yeah, so after 2012, there was there was this sort of reckoning where the Republicans decided that they were going to rebrand after losing in 2012 because they honestly thought they could win in 2012. And their idea was, let's soften our anti-immigration stuff and let's work it out. Let's be open. Like Jeb Bush. Jeb was the face of that. But then, and also they were all right, let's push Jeb, let's push Marco Rubio, let's push Ted Cruz, and let's try to, because it was a logical thing if you think like a political scientist, that there is the Hispanic community in the United States, Latinx community in the United States is on the whole very Catholic, very conservative, arguably right-wing even, yet they all vote Democrat because of all of this racist anti-immigration rhetoric. And so the Republicans thought, hey, we could court this demographic into our party and change things around. And this has happened before. For example, the Muslim community of the United States had been in the 90s a little bit more right-wing. They were a little bit more of a Democratic support, or sorry, a Republican supporting demographic. And yet here we go. Yet now they're a very solid Democratic voting bloc because of racism, and the Republican Party are becoming more and more irrelevant because of racism. But then in 2016, I would argue that that the Democrats more lost because they didn't listen to their own base and they tried to be Republican light. I think that Hillary Clinton lost the election more than Donald Trump won the election. I think that that's an important distinction that we need to make today that we do not, in my opinion. And so, but yet the Democrats are dead set on not learning the lesson of 2016, because in order to learn the lesson of 2016, they might have to change their policies, and neoliberalism is the most important thing to hold up. You cannot give that up, even if it means losing elections. They would rather lose elections than have to change their policies to be more left-wing. So they're trying to find any excuse possible. That's why they latched on to Russia so hard and all that kind of stuff. I think he set up to talk people out of supporting Trump. Last I heard him talking about it, he was considering making an exception for people who make death threats. Yeah, I think that was a recipe for disaster. So, how would you do a criminal justice system in an ideal world? It would be restorative, not retributive. So basically, instead of thinking this person did a crime, we need to think of the appropriate punishment for that person. And in my mind, the idea would be more, this person committed a crime against a person in a community. What went wrong? What are the things in society that went wrong to push this person to this point? Because nobody just unlike, the way that the media might tell you, people don't commit crimes because they're mustache twirling villains. They commit crimes because of either poverty, desperation, or things like, undiagnosed mental illness or something. There's something causing it. And my ideal justice society would be about finding the root cause of whatever the quote-unquote crime was and trying to, between the parties that are there, so between the person who committed the crime, the perpetrator and the victim, and the relatives of the victim, trying to come to some sort of negotiated arrangement about what does their what would do to try and make amends. How do we try and fix, first of all, the ill that caused this person to do the thing they did in the first place, and second, try to find some way for that person to pay their debts in one way or another, even if they've destroyed something that's irreplaceable. Find some way to at least try and restore the balance that has been disrupted by this event. And that would be my solution. That's my ideal justice system. Remember the migration from Reddit to Vote after Fat People Hate was banned? That was wild. Yeah, exactly. Vote's another example. Like when you have a completely, or Telegraph, I think now, for the people who got kicked off Twitter. These are platforms that are quote-unquote full free speech platforms that have no moderation, and they just end up being a cesspit of all the people who got kicked out of the main platforms. The best part, though, is that Vote and Telegram and stuff like that, they are... nobody looks at them, and they're not relevant on there. And so it turns out that when you moderate your platform, especially when you are a platform of note that gets a lot of attention, you can cause certain ideas and certain ways of thinking to no longer have a platform to convert people to their way of thinking. It's almost like if you kick the Nazis off of Twitter, there would probably be fewer Nazis. Just a thought. Yeah. Have you heard about Moomin? Apparently it's really popular on Tumblr now, which is nice for me as a Swede. No, I've never heard of Moomin. Sorry. Hello from Kingsville, Ontario. Well, hello, Jeffrey. Okay. What is your view on the repression of religion in Red China and the Eastern Bloc? How could it have been fixed? Is anti-theism an important part of communist states and groups? No, I don't think so at all. I think that if you follow my channel enough, and I know you have, C.R. Smith, but I heavily disagree. I'm going to be making a video later this year on the Holodomor and communist atrocities, and how do we talk about those things. That's going to be like, I think it's going to be like this fall, I'm going to do a video on that. Because right now, criticism of things like the Great Leap Forward and the Soviet Union doesn't happen on the left, or at least it doesn't happen extensively. And so a lot of the times the public platform for ripping on the ripping on the Soviet Union, for criticizing the Soviet Union, for criticizing the current slate of quote unquote communist countries that we've had, falls to the right, like books like the Black Book of Communism or like Jordan Peterson and things like that. And so in my mind, we need to talk about a left critique of Sovietization. And one of the things that you mentioned is the repression of those who have religious beliefs, because anti-theism as part of communism is cruel. It is a simplistic reading of what religion is and what religion could be. And in my mind, often will, through violence and repression, suppress some of people's best socialist instincts by attaching it to their faith. For example, if you say that communism is anti-Christian, then all of the Christians, for example, like people under liberation theology, who would have a lot of commonalities with leftist ideas, as they do, there are readings of Christianity that are very openly leftist. You're excluding them and you're kicking them out of the space. And in my mind, I think that it would be no surprise for what you know about me to say that I believe that diversity is strength. I think that having a diversity of belief, diversity of people, diversity of experience, and diversity of ideas is how we have a strong and mutually reinforcing society, is having our first dedication being to letting people mutually exist. And so in my mind, suppressing groups is never going to be a recipe for a successful leftist movement, because it'll always just kind of burn down into infighting. All right. Suppose you're the CEO of a major company, but one day you suddenly realize anarcho-communism is the correct ideology. What, if anything, is the ethical thing for such a person to do? Turn it into a democracy. Turn it into the world's biggest co-op. That would probably be my start. Do the recent anti-Semitic and Islamophobic attacks that were inspired by the intellectual dark web thinkers prove that some speech should be censored for the sake of public safety? I mean, yes. Censored is a difficult thing to say, but in my mind, yes, I think that hate speech, what you just showed there about how hate speech, like, is the version of, and like this kind of rhetoric I consider hate speech, is like the intellectual version of shouting fire in a crowded theater. If by spreading your ideas you are directly putting people on threats, then yes, you definitely should be tossed out, or maybe if not censored, you should definitely not be given a platform by any reputable institution. You are not. We need to get over the idea that for freedom of speech to be a thing, that we are somehow required to give a platform to all ideas, no matter how bad or discredited they are. Like that. That's complete farce. When did maize farming reach what is now New England? No idea. A long time ago is the answer. Did you know that HUD are rolling back Obama-era regulations to say homeless shelters can't force transfer? What's it called? You mentioned this to me on Tuesday, so yes, I did know that. Can the more strict standards of a scientific discipline appropriate to the judicial system, maybe peer-reviewed sentences? I still think that, like, treating things like having like a one-size-fits-all idea of what is the proper thing to do things like outside of context, things like that, is still, like, I mean, it would be better, but I think that getting rid of the idea of seeing crime as something that is that the response to that is finding a proper punishment is the problem. And I think that the main issue should be getting away from that and moving towards something that is more about trying to restore what has been lost through such a situation. If the victims of crime are totally unreasonable and want something a really extreme from the criminal, what if? Well, that's why I said it would be a negotiation. It wouldn't be. There would be arbiters, there would be social workers, there would be all sorts of people, because, yeah, victims of crime can be very emotional for very understandable reasons. This could be somebody who murdered a family member, for example. And so, yeah, you would definitely need more parties there than just doing whatever the victims want. It would definitely be a quote-unquote negotiation. You've never heard of Moomin. What rock have you been living under? I don't know, but I haven't. You know what? I'll Google it right now. Moomins. Central characters in a series of books and a comic strip by Swedish-speaking Finnish illustrator Tove Jansson. Published in Shields. They're a family of white, round fairy tale creatures with large snouts that make them resemble hippopotamuses. Okay. I don't know what this is. I've never seen it before. This is new. Sorry. Maybe it's a GAD. Maybe it's like a, Israel and Europe thing. Suppose you're CEO of a major company. Oh, we already did that one. Gosh. Let's just move. Do you think we'll be able to get a place where harmful ideas can be effectively questioned and uninternalized? Do you think we'll be able to get to a place where harmful ideas can be effectively questioned and uninternalized? Yeah, that's the idea of, like, essays and classrooms and things like that. Just because, like, the thing is, like, freedom of speech in universities, like, the idea that, like, that people say that their ideas are not able to be discussed in universities, like, trust me, as a history student, the ideas of the Nazis and Nazi ideology is discussed in universities. It's discussed in terrorism studies. It's discussed in hate studies. It's discussed in history. But, like, the idea that somehow in order to have free speech in, like, universities is to not engage with those ideas, but, like, to not criticize them, but just give them a free platform and let them speak to people. Like, there's a difference between we're going to discuss ideologies of hate in our political science class that you are perfectly prepared for, and there's maybe a content warning beforehand, and letting a Nazi come to campus and do a speech with no oversight, and also not letting them, like not having any sort of counterpoint. Like, that is not, like, there's a world of difference between those two things. All right. Very good response. You're the best. Thank you. Thinking more about anti-theism, are there religions or religions that should be repressed, i.e. Scientology? To call Scientology a religion would be a bit of a stretch. In my mind, there's no real, like, religions that are inherently, like, terrible that need to be, like, suppressed. There are religious institutions that are evil and need to be suppressed. For example, Scientology. If there was an actual religion that was like, yeah, we believe in, like, you know, Lord Emperor Xenu, and we believe in the volcano and the frozen spirits and thetans and all that kind of stuff, sure. Why not? If that was a religion, I would not have a problem with it. But when you have the Church of Scientology, an organization that uses self-help doctrine and hiding the more far-fetched versions of their own doctrine in order to con people out of lots and lots of money, especially desperate people and drug addicts, yeah, that is not a good institution, and that should definitely be undone. That's like my... But, like, I think there actually is, I can't remember its name right now, but there actually is, like, a splinter group of Scientology that is about getting rid of the exploitation and kind of going back to basics and giving the same stuff but away for free. And in my mind, that's not a problem to me at all. The girl that has been noticed chatting about religion. Yep. Okay. Should the historicity of religious narrative be questioned by historians, even if it deeply offends religious people and hard-held beliefs? Yes. There's a difference between being sensitive to people's religious beliefs and being unacademic. I mean, like, for example, in my Ramadan video, I floated the idea that is pretty common, which is that many of the things that are in the Quran are developments that came from early Christian churches in places like Syria, and that a lot of, like, the ideas that we associate with Islam were developed there, and that the Quran was has a development on those ideas, which would fly right in the face of most Muslim interpretations of the Quran, which, at its core is that the Quran was dictated by the Archangel Gabriel to Muhammad and is word for word a divine text of God. But it's perfectly okay to say, this is what Muslims believe, this is what the archaeology says, and to be sensitive that they might disagree and they might have reasons that aren't entirely scientific, but that's okay. You don't have to be 100% scientific about all of your beliefs all the time, as long as you're not hurting people. Or, be best if you weren't hurting yourself either. Like, for example, people who believe in I don't believe in astrology. I have no reason to believe in astrology. Am I going to make, am I going to make a huge bugbear about people thinking, I just read the horoscopes because it's fun? Like, why are we giving shit to those people? Like, yeah, there are con artists who are like fortune tellers and stuff like that. But, like, in my mind, that's, there's different things, different levels of stuff. Read the whole thing. It was a different awful thing being done onto trans people. Well, shit. The Trump crackdown on trans people, especially homeless trans people, which, like, that's like a thing that we don't talk about much in LGBTQ plus discussions, is that in LGBTQ plus spaces, there's a lot of focus on very liberal bourgeois issues, and like rich LGBTQ plus people have really dominated the conversation, when like the big LGBTQ plus justice issues we should be talking about are poverty, homelessness, and violence. And doing that to homeless people is literally attacking the most vulnerable trans people, instead of like, like that. Those are things that we should really be putting energy into. Suppose because systems are more democratic, we end up in a future where most of Europe and Canada have left-wing governments, but the U.S. doesn't. How would the U.S. react to that situation? It's happened before. Lots of friction. Trust me, like, Canada, the Prime Minister and the President have at times in the past almost gotten into fistfights. Usually, as long as there's not like a rampantly bananas president, left-wing governments and right-wing governments find ways to at least not kill each other. At least when they're all, like, first world liberal countries. The religion of Trumpology. Oh, boy. Why do people get upset about the content warnings at universities? Why shouldn't it be up to the student if they want to miss a lecture or not? I don't know. I don't know why people are making an issue. It's because I have zero idea. Even Nahuatl and religions that practice human sacrifice. I definitely think that you could have the Nahuatl faith and not practice human sacrifice. I mean, it would be quite a stretch. It's probably why there are no Aztecs anymore. Well, I mean, one of many reasons. I feel like that's a different thing. In many ways, the process of human sacrifice in Mesoamerica was something that predates the Nahuatl faith, but let's just say the religions are plastic, and they can be changed. They have changed a lot. Why did the Haudenosaunee object to what archaeologists say about their history? Specifically, there's some issues with the fact that archaeological evidence shows that shortly after the founding of the Confederacy, they basically went on a series of conquests into Huron territory, when that flies a lot in the face of the Haudenosaunee thoughts on founding a league on the ending of violence and the creation of peace. That's the main reason. But like, there's a lot of evidence that shortly after the Confederacy was founded, there was a lot of war. As an example. Do you think games would be an effective way to get people thinking about leftist ideas? I think that there are some in that case. Yeah, but like, in general, like, games and culture and things like that could definitely have, in subtle and in major ways, changes to how people conceive of the way the world works. Because if you think about it, we only have our own experiences, and anything that is directly out of our own qualia experience, qualia, there's a philosophy term right there. Anything that's right out of your direct qualia is going to be a mediated experience. It's going to be media, whether it be television, whether it be somebody telling something to you or describing something to you. You're never going to be able to experience outside your own experience without it being mediated. And there are forms of mass media, like games, like movies, like shows, like books, that have historically always been amazing for explaining ideas like this. And so, yeah. For example, like, you could do all sorts of fun stuff. Like, you could change the Paradox games so that they're not constantly promoting a expansionist liberal idea of progress, or any other thing. Or Monopoly, or like the Landlord's game, I think it was called. How many people understand that at least 85% of the Bible, the Quran, and the Torah are identical? Anybody who's familiar with those religions, Muslims definitely point that out. Any Muslim will tell you about how they revered Jesus as a prophet, and how like they think that Abraham was the first Muslim and things like that. So Muslims are definitely high on that list of pointing out that 85% of the Abrahamic faiths are all pretty much identical. What's a Haudenosaunee? The Haudenosaunee Confederacy is a confederation of 6 nations that exist in upstate New York, primarily in upstate New York and southern Ontario, and Quebec. They are oftentimes referred to as either the Six Nations or the Iroquois, but the term that they prefer to use for themselves is the Haudenosaunee, which stands for People of the Longhouse. The reason why 255 is asking about that is because that's the subject of the Step Back video that's coming out in 14 minutes. So if you want to learn more, hang tight. All right. Fully automated luxury LGBT plus transhumanist space and com question. What's thoughts on the whole freedom gas or freedom molecules thing? I've only heard sporadic things on Twitter about it. I don't exactly know what it is. I'll be honest. I think it has something to do with like climate change denial. Maybe has something to do with like the H Bomber Guy video that comes out today. But I've already seen it because I'm a patron. But you know what I mean. I'm very sorry, girl. It's been noticed about you being denied a job because of being masculine presenting. That sucks. If it makes you feel any better, which sad comfort, at least you'll know that that was not if someone's going to deny you a job based on that's probably not a place you want to work anyway. But if things are desperate, that's pretty rough. There's a new H-Bomb video today. Hooray. There should be. He's released the video like 2 days ago for backers. And I know a new one's supposed to be coming out like any day now. Cisgender homeless people also suffer violence. So why is violence against homeless trans people is a trans issue and not a class issue? It is a class issue, but trans people experience homicide and violence and homelessness at rates extremely disproportionate compared to cis people, because lots of trans people, especially trans youth, there's a lot of like trans teenagers and gay teenagers who end up on the streets because their parents kick them out, or they're denied jobs because they're masculine presenting, for example. And in the United States, it's actually legal to discriminate against trans people. And so, like, there's a lot of stuff where, like, these people end up they end up losing even what little forms of access to the basics that they need that they would have. And since trans people don't get protected by the police very much because they just because of societal taboo have been can very easily be targeted for violence, and they often are, and it's horrible. Like, trans people get murdered at an insanely high rate, and they experience homelessness at a very high rate, and usually at a very young age. This used to be a thing that LGBTQ plus people cared about until rich people started taking over the conversation. This is why this actually is an intersectional thing. It's a LGBTQ plus issue, and it's a class issue, because when the movement moved away from things like healthcare and like protection and like all these kinds of things, and they moved towards things like legal recognition in marriage. Now, while that was an important thing to do, that very much was focusing on bourgeois issues rather than like, you know, the actual issue, like the like hard issues that affect a lot of people. And so that's basically why. Do you think religious education can be psychologically abusive? Like telling kids they'll burn in hell if they misbehave? Oh, hell yeah, that can definitely be psychological abuse. B-dubs, define qualia. Qualia is a word for intangible, raw experience. Philosophers, some philosophers would say that, like, when you experience, and there's a lot of things to experience that cannot be expressed in words, or that trying to express raw experience in words is always going to be a representation and incomplete in some way. So the philosophy goes that qualia is the raw experience, more or less. Okay. Just need to talk about somebody talking about systemic homelessness. I'm currently hungry. Why we focus on systemic homelessness and hunger? Why can't we just get focused on getting me lunch? Oh boy. There's a discussion about homelessness and transness that I think I missed. Oh well. Okay. A question I've been thinking about a lot recently. How would an anarchist city engagement game look like? An anarchist sim city. Ooh. Well, Gad, if you have an answer to that, I would love to hear it, because that sounds like a really fun game. But that's an example about how you could, if you made a game like that, you could open up people's imaginations to different ways of organizing society that don't require liberal, like, technocratic planning. Like for example, City Skylines or Sim City for millennials. It is a game that teaches you that cities function because of proper planning and expert management, and that if you run a city properly to make sure that you produce the most amount of money, if I remember that's like the judgment of how good you're doing, then that is good. But like, you could definitely change that. You could definitely twist those things on their head. I think one of the perfect things that explains that is, like, there was a person who like solved Sim City, and it turned this place into this place that is extremely efficient and generates tons and tons and tons of money, but it's like a dystopian nightmare, and everybody lives like one block from all of the services they need, and they all die young, and there's like no health care and like all these things, but it produces a shit ton of money. And it just shows that, like, games, even like simulation games, even paradox games, sorry to be sacrilegious here, have a worldview. They are mediated representations of the real world or of history and things like that. And you just simply are going to, build that up. You simply are. You can figure that out, and in many ways, you could turn that on its head. Okay. Human sacrifice is older than the Nahua people. Is there evidence for how far back it goes? Olmec, pre-migration. It seems to have been a pretty strong staple in Mesoamerica. Now, the Nahuas took it to like an absolute, took it to its logical extreme. But human sacrifice had been around since even times there's human sacrifice in the Teotihuacanos, which are like some of like the earliest people that we've got constructs from. But yeah, human sacrifice in places like, and human sacrifice is actually a pretty common thing that is that shows up in climates like that of central Mexico. The Quran actually has little to do with the Hebrew Bible. They use similar characters but tell very different narratives of those characters. All right, today I learned. Is there archaeological evidence for the 11th or 12th century wars that supposedly had taken place before the Haudenosaunee were formed? I don't know. Probably. I think that like a lot of the Morning Wars stuff is pretty well solidified. Like the study, there's a lot of corroborating evidence. I'm not sure about archaeological evidence. There's a lot of historical evidence that was the case. There's a lot of like various different sources that back it up. Okay. When I told you that you could take Kelly to a communist future, she's a social democrat. Do you think that she'd actually want to go? Yes, she's actually going through a bit of a transition right now. She's reading the bread book, so things are happening on that front. Thoughts on Yang? Andrew Yang? Silicon Valley bro. Pushes UBI, which is, to my mind, a band-aid for a systemic... is a band-aid on on a broken arm. And I just have... And it won't have a long-term solution because the market will adjust. So, yeah, I'm not a big fan of Andrew Yang. And when I get to the video in my Quick Step series on Andrew Yang, I'll probably talk about it more. Did you know that the UN estimates that it would only cost $3 billion or $30 billion annually to end world hunger? Yeah, it's a political issue. It's not a logistics issue. We have had way more stuff. We have enough production that we could have lived in a post-scarcity utopia like for the last 50 years if we wanted to. We just don't because we distribute things unevenly. Why does my game lag every time I go to Odessen? Don't know what you're talking about. Sorry. We're getting close to the end. Let me just... 2 more questions. How do you deal with situations where parents are psychologically abusing their kids but justify it with religion? Like those Muslims in the UK who want to teach their kids homosexuality is bad. Yeah, that would not... The community would have to step in and tell them not to. Psychological abuse is not good. Okay. Last question I got here is from Michael McGee. How would you begin to educate people out of liberal ideology without them shutting you out? That's a point of meeting them where they are and working in small steps, i.e., showing how much you agree on in principles. I think that a lot of times liberals have a lot of the same moral instincts as socialists, but they just don't have the same... They think that they are being smart or practical by embracing liberalism because that's what all of the academics has taught them, and they've sort of haven't done enough independent thinking to sort of come along to things, and they haven't like read the same things as you. And so thinking about it more as like understanding that they have most of them anyways have a similar disposition. They want a lot of the same things. They want a more just world. They want a more fair world. They just think that this is the best way to do it, and to be like, okay, well, why don't you just like meet them on their own ground, and kind of push them more and more. Be patient, be understanding, one day at a time. My friend said the Battle of Milvian Bridge is the most important battle in history. Do you agree? I don't think I've heard of it, so no. I don't really believe much in the importance of any particular battle, honestly. All right. I think that is enough for this stream. I'm going to get you guys a link to the next Step Back video, which should be out in just a matter of seconds now. Let me just get you all a link for the chat, and here you all go. I hope that you guys have a great week. My next stream, I think, is on Monday, so see you guys soon. Bye-bye.